Coming up next, I'm Walking with Dad.
I always knew growing up that we had three things in Miami. For me personally, it was either music, sports, or the streets. With my mom and my dad knowing the area of Miami, they kept us at home. You know, it was either us going to band practice or just us being home.
And welcome back to yet another great episode here with us at Walking with Dad. My name, of course, is Nathan, Elevation Nathan Caldwell. This is Walking with Dad, where we give our dads and our fathers the opportunity to give their perspective on the significance of being present within their kids' life and within the family altogether. Here we celebrate Father's Day every single day while we are working on bringing the family back together one step at a time. Today I have a very special guest with us here today. I've actually known this gentleman, today's guest, since roughly about 2007. We had met back when I think he was finishing up with college. I was just pretty much starting with college, but we met at a particular event within the spring semester of the school year, at the time referred to as the HBCU National Band Directors Consortium. This was, I think it was my freshman year, so around like spring of 2007. I met this individual then. I played trombone at the time. He played and still plays and even teaches trombone. He has actually had the opportunity to not only attend an HBCU as well as a PWI, but he has also had the opportunity to now teach at both an HBCU and a PWI. And he is a father of two daughters, and he is a married husband. So without further ado, I want to present to some and introduce to most others, Mr. Dunwoody Merville. Dunwoody, what's going on, man?
Hey man, what's going on? How's it going with you?
Man, I can't call it, man. I'm actually like very, very excited to be sitting with you today, man.
Oh man, come on, man. I'm just another person, man. But listen, I'm all about sharing information and just uplifting, inspiring, edifying, because I find that from other people as well too. So whatever we can do to get better as human beings, and most importantly as fathers, I'm all for it, bro.
Definitely, man. Before we get started for Walking with Dad, as you all will see by the time that we finish talking on today, and Dunwoody, this is on behalf of not only myself, but anybody who knows even a little bit about you, whether they have seen you play, heard you play, or has been around you in the musicianship circle. You're kind of a big deal, man.
I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, you're kind of a big deal. I don't want to like toot your horn too much, but I don't know, man. Like just fill us in a little bit about what it is that you do and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, currently, I teach at Stetson University, which is in DeLand, Florida, north of Orlando. Um, I have been teaching my own studio. This is my first year at Stetson, but I've taught in a collegiate setting since 2011. So this is throughout my master's program where I was at Florida State University as a performance major, but I was also a teaching assistant. Then I also had a chance to go back taught high school for a couple of years. Then went back to Florida State for my doctoral degree, and where I was also a doctoral teaching assistant. So having that experience at Florida State within those 5 years, and then couple that with the 6 years I have taught in the collegiate setting in my own studio, has done a great thing, not just for me, but more specifically for those who I've come in contact with. As far as trombone playing, I've played with a number of orchestras regionally. played with the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra. I played with the Ocala Symphony Orchestra. Even some orchestras abroad as well too. Also play with the Colors of Music Festival Orchestra, which is comprised of all minorities, which is a great thing. And the base is actually in Charleston, South Carolina, but I've been in dealings with them when they have performed over at Sacramento in California. So I've been blessed to perform in many idioms when it comes to trombone. I've also had a chance to partake back in 2010 with Drumline Live. So that's the people who's over Drumline Live. They reached out to me and they asked if I would like to be a part of the casting. And within that time frame, we did about 3 weeks in Japan, where we did about 13, 14 cities. And as a cast member, I was also one of the soloists with the group. And the highlight with that with that organization is performing in Tokyo in front of 15,000 people as a soloist, and that gave me the foundation as a soloist to perform in front of people. Because if I can perform in front of 15,000 people, I can definitely do 150 or 75 at a recital. So when it comes to trombone, it's orchestral. There's jazz, there's R&B, there's neo soul, there's calypso, there's gospel. And where I tell my students that wherever the trombone goes, I travel that lane. So whether if it's Orchestral Avenue or Jazz Boulevard, or maybe even Calypso Street, I'm there. Because the trombone has given me the opportunity to not only use it as a gift, not just a talent, but just as a gift, but use that gift to enrich people's lives.
For sure, man. That's quite the repertoire, man. And I know that's probably just scraping the surface for you, honestly,
Man,
man.
whatever. Crazy.
So you're teaching collegiately and you have your own separate studio outside of that.
Yes, yes. So I teach collegiately, but I also have my own personal studio. I have an LLC, which is D Merville Music, and I use my business to essentially reach out to students, working with band programs, whether if it's middle school or high school band programs, and even other collegiate institutions, by way of providing master classes, by way of providing clinics. I also do a lot of the all-state videos in the state of Florida, and I use my business to fund that. I am not necessarily hired by the Florida Bandmasters Association to do that. That's out of my own funding, out of my own time to give back. Because again, when I was in high school, I didn't have anybody to essentially provide videos and resources to say, hey, this is what a trombone can do. And with the time and the resources that I have now, I wanted to give back to all the trombonists within the state of Florida and abroad. So I've always made a pact saying that, as long as I'm alive, I always want to help people, because I know that if, I'm not on this earth to help myself, that's a thing. Yes, we need to take care of ourselves. I am not excluding that. But what comes first is other people, because we live in a culture today that's me, myself, and I, and I how I grew up, it was more about other people. How do I help my fellow brother? How do I help my fellow sister? I can always take care of myself, but who's to say that the person who needs my help, I may not see them tomorrow. So that's kind of my philosophy of things.
And I appreciate that, man. I appreciate what your mindset is and your heart, definitely, man. We could definitely expound on that a bit much, but we can touch on that, of course, throughout, obviously. And obviously the trombone, because we could talk trombone for the entire time that we're
We can.
sitting today. But
We definitely can.
let's do something, man. Let's just go back within your life, your childhood, man. Could you fill us in and tell us about your upbringing from when you were younger? Were were or are both of your parents in the picture? Were or are they together? Fill us in on that, man.
Yes. So my parents, they were and are still in the picture. Thankfully I know everybody has different experiences. Growing up in Miami, I was the oldest of three. Now I have a total of four. It's a total of four brothers, well, three other brothers. It's four boys that my parents had. Um and my parents played a pivotal role. I know my dad, he was involved in music. He was kind of self-taught. He played the piano. He also played the acoustic guitar. My mom, she sang in the church choir. So it was kind of a no-brainer to where I just kind of navigated towards music, and my brothers did as well too. It's just that I'm the only one that does it professionally. My second sibling played the tuba. My third sibling played the euphonium. And my fourth sibling, who was 15 years younger than my third sibling, he just recently graduated from University of Miami. He plays trombone. Now, we wanted him to play either trumpet or horn. But he mentioned to me that when he was maybe about 10, 11 months old, he was crying in the crib. And I just had the trombone, which was my instrument. And I played, a lullaby for him, and he just stopped crying. And he said he remembers that moment, which is the reason why he navigated to trombone. He's a composition. He just finished at University of Miami. He's a composition major, really interested in film scoring. He does a lot with beats. As a matter of fact, he actually started making beats when he was 10. And it wasn't any Mary Had a Little Lamb type of beats. It was like, wait, is this Timbaland? Or wait, is this Swiss Beats type? It was like, and for me, I typically don't gas, my brother up like that. It's like, no, this is really good. So he has excelled, and all my brothers are doing their thing as well too. And my family, my mom and my dad played a pivotal role in that because they kept us grounded. In Miami, what I like to tell my students is that Miami is not what sports shows will show you. They will show you South Beach, and they will show you, that, hey, this is Miami. No, that's South Beach. Miami is First 48. If you were to turn on First 48, that is Miami. That is Miami proper. And I always knew growing up that we had three things in Miami. For me personally, it was either music, sports, or the streets. And the thing is that with my mom and my dad knowing the area of Miami, they kept us at home. It was either us going to band practice or just us being home. And of course, in our neighborhood it was okay, but it wasn't necessarily it was safe, but there were temptations. And what I mean by that, we had people across the streets, selling drugs. We had people across the streets, literally across the street, doing fraud, where I know that they were sitting in their front porch just home every day, and there was at least a different car in front of their house. Nothing, there was no Nissan, no Toyotas. It was like Mercedes and all the cars within that ilk. And for me, being the oldest, I could have walked across the street and said, hey, how can I get this fast success? And, unfortunately, some of the people who are across the street, they're no longer with us because there was some bad transactions that happened. Some of them died. And again, it's just that protection, that covering, not just from my mom and my dad, but just, from God, just kind of just keeping us protected.
Man, and I don't even want to like throw shade at Miami at all, because I've been there once, and you only see stuff that's on TV, as far as like TV and movies, as far as like Miami Vice or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then obviously Bad Boys and all that stuff. But what you pointed out reminds me of like one of my favorite scenes in like a movie, of any movie. It's American Gangster, where Denzel's character is being confronted basically by his mother. Things are starting to pop off and go south a little bit, and she's talking with them about like you could have been a preacher, you could have been a lawyer, you could have done all these other things, and had you done that, your siblings would have of course followed you because you
Follow.
were the
Hmm.
oldest. but you out here in these streets. So prime example with you, man, is two things from what you had mentioned, which was that you chose to take the better route, the higher road, definitely with what you chose to do, as well as with your youngest brother, that nobody can deny, obviously, that there is power in music and
Mhm.
the amount of power within music, because for him to be able to have that memory from 10 months old is quite significant. Honestly, man.
It is, yeah.
So your dad and mom, obviously, but dad was influential for your life as far as getting into music altogether. Um, how else was your upbringing with having your dad in the picture? Um, how else was that impactful for you?
So I kind of made a reference of this earlier in the week, but it was somewhat like this, but not 100% like this. So if you know Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson's father, and how he kind of galvanized all the brothers, that's how my dad was. Once he realized that all of us played music and we were like good at it, he kind of put us in a small band at the church, and it was, I remember even dating back to my seventh grade year. That's when I had my first legit performance outside of school. Um, I started playing trombone in sixth grade in 1996. And then once I got the hang of it after a couple of weeks, things just kind of took off from there. And my dad, he took notice. So once I made it to my seventh grade, there was this huge wedding, huge, like probably one of the biggest weddings at our church, that my dad mentioned to the person who was getting married, say, "Hey, my son can play at your wedding." And I'm just hearing about this maybe a week before the wedding, and I'm like, "What?" So I literally had my first quote unquote gig in seventh grade, playing in front of the entire church and playing in front of like literally maybe about 300 guests at the wedding. And that's what first started everything. Everything started off from right there. How what I was doing in school and how it translated into the things I was doing for the community. And my dad, he pushed me, because he saw that in me, and he knew that I would be going places. My mom, specific with parents or island parents, they would say, "Hey, you're either a doctor, you're either a dentist, you're either this, that, or third." But it was like when I mentioned music, and they saw that I was really growing and having a heart for it, that they was like, "Okay, well, let them cook." They'll essentially in that manner, and the rest was history. So my dad, he, as I mentioned, my dad pushed me in that direction. My mom, she was very supportive as well too in that regard.
Oh man. And I think in there you had mentioned having island parents,
Yeah.
where especially like with your last name, where's your background or your origin?
Yes, both my parents are from Haiti. Both our parents are from Haiti. I've never been to Haiti. I've born and raised in Miami. Um, I do want to go, when things get a little bit safer. I want to be able to take my wife and take my two daughters, and but yeah, just having there's some pros and cons with having strict parents. I know my dad specifically was strict, so as a father myself, I do take a little of what he has shown me and a little of what my mom has shown me as well too. And also with in my experiences over the years to help me to be, the father that I am today.
Nice, man. Nice. I'd touch on that. I'd stay on that strict part, but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, because you said dad was a bit stricter.
yeah, he was. He was.
And of course, with y'all being down in Miami, I would have an idea, but why would you say that he was as strict as he was toward y'all?
Well, he had another seven, or he had eight other siblings. So and he was somewhere near the middle, like he wasn't the middle child, but out of nine, he would say the middle would probably be five. He was around that. and having older brothers and younger brothers. So is, same thing with older sisters and younger sisters. Um, Growing up in Haiti and then having a chance to come to the United States and literally start from nothing, and that there's something to admonish and something to learn from having nothing, to where you really have to work for everything that you have. And as a matter of fact, he just recently retired this past week after 35 years. And it goes to show from his tenacity, the work ethic. Part of the work ethic that I have is from my dad and from my mom as well too. But knowing that my dad, that you got to take care of it. This may happen, but you still have to go ahead and take care of things. But in regards to the question that you mentioned about him being strict, is again, it's because of his upbringing and then coming to Miami and knowing that, Miami, although it's home, the streets are not safe, you know. So part of his um with him being strict was his concern of us keeping us safe, because what if he didn't care? What if he just said, "Hey, you go ahead, do your thing. There's no curfew, just come in whenever." I would not be here today, So there is a lot of good. I wouldn't even say some good. There is a lot of good with having parameters. Now, there's a difference between being strict and being mean. There's a big difference between the two. Being strict is essentially you caring for the person and you making sure that they are well taken care of. And while you saying no, there's a reason why you're saying no. You're giving, and my dad would tell me, "Hey, this is why I am saying no, because of X, Y, and Z." Being mean is just doing things without giving any type of explanation, and so on and so forth. So there was a method to his madness, quote unquote. And again, it helped shape me to who I am today.
Man, that's powerful, man. Mom sounds like she was right there by his side. How impactful for you also was mom's presence, even with dad's strictness?
So while my dad was strict, my mom was the one that kind of she had her own strictness as well too, but it wasn't as strict as my dad. So while my dad would just implement, just him being strict, my mom was there to not to undercut anything, because what my dad said was like, okay, this is why it happened, and type thing. And my mom was there just to re-emphasize what my dad would say, but just in a calmer voice. It's like, "Hey, just as your dad mentioned, this is why, he wants you to remain safe. This is why you can't go outside across the street to play with the neighbors who are not doing X, Y, and Z." So it was just there to reinforce. So although my dad was, I guess, more of the bark, my mom was the soothing echo, the soothing echo to the bark, saying that, "Hey, just like your dad said, there's, as he mentioned and his reasoning, hopefully you can see why he said it." And it was just, again, just to reinforce. So um I'm grateful for my upbringing. I wouldn't change it, because of the fact that I would not be who I am today, because you know it helped me to be, the father that I am, the husband that I am, and most importantly, the human being that I am today.
Got you, man. Got you. There's one thing that I've heard from you that I want to, well, of course, hear from you. You have had your upbringing and everything of that nature with being the oldest of boys, having brothers and siblings, and you're a girl dad, so to say. You have two daughters. Of what you learned having brothers, what have you also been able to learn as having, with being a father, now having daughters?
So it's first off, it's a blessing. It's for me. when I knew that we was having our first child, it was literally during my doctoral degree. And for me, knowing that the fact that I've had experience having brothers, of course, by default, I was like, well, my first child, I wanted to be a boy because I have experienced, I know what it is. My youngest brother, I've watched him, I've seen him as a baby, so it was almost like, okay, he's my brother, but I could kind of see him as a son because like I'm, way older than he is, and just having that experience. But having a daughter, for me, it was new, because out like my mom was the only woman in the house.
Mm.
Literally, it was just littered with boys. And sometimes boys, we can be a little bit rambunctious, like, jumping off of chairs, playing wrestling and doing this and that, breaking stuff left or right.
Yes.
But how it governed me as a father now is that having a daughter is knowing to be patient. And it's a thing to where I want to give her my all, and now having two doing the same, just want to give my all, uh and just want to serve as a good role model, because we know in our society, there's a lot of young girls, unfortunately, that don't have the father in the household, and from the men's point of view, from the father's point of view, who are not in their lives, they probably don't see how much that impacts them, um every situation is different. I don't know everyone's situation, but I know that just watching my students, specifically both students who are in HBCUs and students who are in PWIs, without having that male presence in the household, it does affect them. Whether if it's a girl or a boy that you have as a dog, as a kid, but specifically for the girls, it just gives them an example of that once they get older, what type of man that they would want from, as a partner. I remember when me and my wife, we were dating, she talked about her dad, and when she talked about her dad and everything that she said about him, I'm like, wow, like he sounds cool. And then when I finally met him, like he real chill and he real cool, a lot of wisdom. And along with the things that I learned from my dad, I've also learned from my father-in-law as well too, you know, and how my wife, how she was explaining, like it was almost like she was gleaning by talking about her father, and even to a point to where when she would cry when her father would when her father was disappointed in her, so it just shows that she had a lot of reverence and a lot of respect for her dad. And as she mentioned that to me, that I want to be the same for my daughters. I want to be there as much as I can. I want to support them. Yes, when it comes to correcting them, just making sure that, hey, I'm disappointed and this is why I'm disappointed. So it's the whole macro aspect of things, looking at the bigger picture, knowing that however I treat my daughters, I know once they get to a teenager, I want to be able to take them out on their first date. So that way they
Mm.
know how a guy should court them, and anything less, they should not want anything, do anything with them, So just to remind them that they're beautiful, just to remind them that they are queens, just to remind them that, they're smart, intelligent, and that they can do anything. So that's probably the reason why I have daughters, because of the fact that um if I had boys, maybe if they, ride their bike across the street, I'd be like, all right, man, go ahead, do your thing. No, now I would protect them, but my wife would tell you that I'm probably more overprotective because of the fact that I have daughters, because I want to just make sure that they're good. Just as how my parents were protective of me, I
Yeah.
had that same protection over my daughters, because it's a crazy world out there.
Dunwoody, you said so much, but you said so much of value. Like it wasn't just a lot of stuff. Like, I heard that because you were protected, it's almost like what is it said? Usually, generational curses, but
Hmm.
that's a generational blessing that
Yeah.
since you were protected, you also want to be a protector. And then
Right.
also that your wife, having had her dad in the picture, is now, I wouldn't say that it was probably so much of I mean, unless you would say that, so much of pressure on you to want to kind of like match what her father was to her, but in your own way, respect that she had her father, or excuse me, that she has her father, and that
Hmm.
you were going to be in the picture for her in your own way, not to try
It
to,
was a blueprint.
yeah.
It was another blueprint that I can add to the overall structure. So like just hearing that, it was like, okay, and just knowing that once we had girls, I was like, well, let me take my experiences plus the experiences that my wife has had in her father, so that way I can create those experiences for our daughters.
And then that date part rather, that I don't know altogether, but I know up here that's been the first time that's been mentioned as far as their very first date. You want to be that.
Hmm.
That's everything, man, because instead of you just telling them or hinting at different things, you have that opportunity to actually show them. I'm excited for when that time comes for you, man, because that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful.
Appreciate it.
Of the things that you have learned from when you were younger, as you were coming up or even up till now, whatever the case might be, would you say that more for you might have been caught than taught from like specifically your dad and your parents?
Repeat the question again. You said that if I'm trying to internalize. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So from your parents, throughout your upbringing, would you say that more has been caught or that more had actually been taught from them?
I would say it's a combination of both. Um, m- I believe that my parents gave me a good foundation of things, but just like one would say as an educator, there's only but so much the university can teach you. Everything else you experience. Your experience is your teacher. Experience is your best teacher. Someone will say, "Hey, don't touch that stove because it's hot." Now they told you, but if you want to experience it, it's gonna stick because you experience it, you touch that stove, be like, oh, it's actually hot. You should have listened, but by the fact that you experienced it, now you're like, okay, I am not going to touch the stove. So as mentioned, my family, my mom and my dad, they gave a good foundation. As a matter of fact, as I tell people that I've actually uh was brought up by two entities, my mom and my dad, and then what I experienced in the high school. And what I mean by that, high school, being in the fact that I'm from Miami, I would call it the streets. So there was a lot of people who were into a lot of things. And for me, by watching, I picked up the formula of what they were doing, not the thing that they were doing themselves. So I know a lot of people who are hustlers and doing, X, Y, and Z. So I wasn't necessarily picking up what they were doing, but how they were doing it. So I'm picking up, oh, they're hustling, doing X, Y, and Z. Let me hustle and put this in a positive standpoint to be a hustler to get my education, be a hustler to be a provider for my wife and my kids, be a hustler to do X, Y, and Z, to help people as much as possible. So I was actually brought up by two entities, my mom and my dad, which was positive, and there was, the streets by way of the school, which was not necessarily negative, but there was some aspect of it as I'm watching them. You say, okay, I don't want to do what you're doing, but I see the heart that you have in doing X, Y, and Z. Let me take this framework and apply it to something positive.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah, man.
With you being an educator and with your experience now, and I know that you had also touched on it as far as having students, female students in particular, that might very well not have had their dad in the picture. Maybe not directly, obviously, because you were their teacher, but to what extent do you feel that you were somewhat of like a father figure for them at the time that you had them as students?
A good example of this is when I was a band director. I was a band director in Tallahassee for a couple of years, and the school that I was over, it was a Title One inner city school, which was essentially similar to my upbringing. You know, now this Title One school, it's unfortunately it was like a lot of the students in the band program came from single home households, and it was mainly mothers who were taking care of them. Now, I remember in my meetings with like my first meeting with the students, they all, they were excited that I was coming in as a band director and this and that. And I asked them like, what do you want? And overwhelmingly, all the students mentioned they students said this. They said they need more discipline. These are the students. These are students who look like me and you. They're like they need more discipline. And I was like, you sure this is what you want? And it was like, yeah, because from the last band director, they felt like they respected her, but they kind of ran over the director type thing. And I knew this because of the fact that the same school that I was a band director, I did my student internship. So I was there for the last band director and how they were governing and this and that, the demographics, and how they also responded to the band director, so not knowing that after I did my internship, that years later that I was going to end up being back at that school to be the band director. So I knew exactly what they were asking for, so while, implemented a strong foundation by, again, there's a difference between being strict and being mean. I was strict. I just wanted to make sure that they were in the straight and narrow. So, for example, like whenever I would say no, like weird enough, when I would tell the students, they asked me something and I would say no, they would look at me sideways because it's almost seemed as if they've never heard the word no. It was like everything was given to them,
Man.
and just because I said no doesn't mean it's not going to happen. No can also mean not right now. So I was also teaching them that some of the things that they may not have been getting at home. And that's for all the males in the in my band, and specifically all the females in the band, and just making sure that I guess I didn't know I was gonna have girls because this was like years before, but when I was a band director, knowing that the fact that I didn't have any sisters, I almost seemed as like more of a father figure, not just to the men in the band program, but to the women in the band program, because I had a heart for helping people, specifically those girls who are in single parent households and who don't have a father, you know, and they clinged to me, because of the fact that they was like, Mr. Merville, like you're like a father figure to us, because they not only had a chance to see correction, because they kids, they thrive for that. They may not say that, but they thrive for correction. But it all depends on how you give the correction, though. They so correction, but also praise as well too. Say, hey, good job. And for us, it's like, wait, good job. When I've never heard that before. So it's always a good balance of correction and praise. When they're not doing right, just let them know, hey, this is not the right way to do it, but also show them the right way. But when they do something well, hey, congratulations, this is great. And for that, that'll help them to be better human beings, to navigate through their life, whether if they choose to go to college or trade school or maybe even military. And that was my mantra, my philosophy for all the people, specifically the girls in the band program.
Man, with that, what would you say on both ends of the spectrum? What would you say is, and I mean, even if it's not just a one thing, your favorite or likable thing about being an educator, and your not so favorite, not so likable thing about being an educator?
Oh, um, I would say my favorite thing is seeing not only the light bulb light up in their heads, but it lights up and explodes. Because of the fact that when someone gets it, when they get it, is like, oh, or maybe a concept that they've always had, but have a different way of looking at it.
Mhm.
They're like, I never saw it that way. Now that concept, it sticks. It's fermented. It becomes cement on in their head because now they have a different way of looking at that particular concept.
Yeah.
So that's, probably one of my favorite things is just to help people get to their uh goals. And I always ask my students, like, what are your goals? What do you want from this experience as I'm teaching you? And I always tell my students as I tell them that, yes, I'm your professor, yes, I'm your teacher, but I am not going to talk down to you as such. I am going to talk to you like we're human beings. It's just so happened that I have the information that you're seeking, and we're here to collaborate, to grow with each other. Because even as an educator, I'm still learning. I'm still learning. I'm learning how to, because not every student learns the same way. So how I'm learning is that how can I give this information in such a way that they will be able to grasp it? Because John is not going to receive it same way as Jimmy, and Jimmy's not going to receive it the same way as Sally. So it's like we have to have a diversified approach to our teachings, to our philosophies, so that way every student that we come across um, is able to, yes, get the information, but apply it in their way of how they apply it. So that's my favorite approach, my favorite way of the thing in regards to teaching, just having students to reach their goals. The thing I don't like, well, I wouldn't even say don't like, because the world is ever changing, and one of the things that we have to do is that we have to find ways to adjust. I can't fault students nowadays for not being as engaged. When I say not as engaged, as in essentially attention spans. We know that the attention span of the student is not as it was 15, 20 years ago, not even 10 years ago. It's drastically changing. Now, that being said, students now are more technologically savvy than we were. I've learned this from my youngest brother. I remember when he was 2, I'm looking for the remote, I'm trying to turn it on. He grabs it from me, 2 years old, and he turns it on and he changes to a channel and gives it to me. I'm like, bro, you 2 years old. So kids now, they're more technologically savvy, but at the same time, there's so many things being thrown at them, so many things at such a short period of time that sometimes they become emotionally detached. Like even with some of the things that take place like in the world, like there's like tragedies, they would see it and their only coping mechanism is to make a joke about it. Again, we see it all the time, and it's probably, we can say it's social media, because people want the attention and this and that. They want to be the first. They want to make this joke and get a lot of likes and a lot of attention and so on and so forth. But because of the fact that while there's pros to being technologically savvy, within that same technology, they become detached, to where it's like, if I'm talking to a student in my office for like 5 or 10 minutes, the eye contact, I'm looking at them the entire time, but it almost seems as if they feel very uncomfortable to make eye contact, because they don't have much face time with another human being. They have a lot of face time with a phone. um so that's what I would say. That would probably be the negative, the con. But there's ways around that. Sometimes, like in my teachings, when I'm working with students one-on-one in applied lessons, in a lesson setting, whenever they perform a particular piece, I would ask them, well, if this particular piece that you performed was on TikTok, would you sit there the entire minute and a half watching this performance, or would you swipe after 3 or 5 seconds? And then They don't even answer me. Again, something clicked. They're like, and now that experience of what I just told them, of what they experience every day, now they can apply it to their performance. And now they have a different perspective on their performance because I've I've spoken their language. I said, hey, if your performance is on TikTok or on Instagram, would you sit there the entire minute and a half, or would you swipe after 3 to 5 seconds? And they're like, you know what, Dr. Merville, I got what you're saying. And now they perform differently as if they were performing on TikTok or performing on Instagram. So that's one way that I utilize something that they experience every day and apply it to my teaching. So that way, something quote unquote negative can have a positive approach to it. There's always something positive to everything that's negative. So although the attention spans are not there, I can utilize some of the things that they do every day in regards to social media and apply it to my teachings. So that way they see that, Dr. Merville, he a little bit old school, but he understands I can reach they understand that I can reach the student in their avenue.
Man, I even had one of those aha moments while you were just speaking, because for the life of me, I've always wondered why on social media, not to make this bad or sad or negative, but if somebody loses a loved one and on social media they post it and people like it, and I'm just like, that seems backwards. Like, why would you like somebody losing somebody? And I guess it's the weird way of viewing it that they're trying to like it to be in support of them.
I think they like it because it shows that I've seen your post. It's a way of acknowledging that I've seen your post, rather than putting, like, let's say Facebook talk, like you putting like either the sad emoji or maybe even the caring emoji or whatnot. Some people they would press like just to acknowledge that they've seen it, or there are others that will hit like and they'll switch to another post because people try not to be as sad as often. And I get that. I get being sad is something that, people is like, it ruins my vibe or this and that. But there's a movie that like probably one of my favorite movies watching with my kids, Inside Out. It's a Pixar movie. And it showcases that, we need all the emotions, specifically the sad emotions, because of the sad emotions, what it does, it gives it gives value to our happy moments.
Yeah.
It gives value to it. Because imagine if we were happy all the time, what can we learn while being happy? There's no growth in being happy. We're happy, everything is good, but there's no learning, there's no growth. Same thing as I always use this as an analogy. If there was sunshine all day, every day, the grass would die. You need rain for the grass to grow. And that rain is sadness. So that way, when we are sad, we lose a loved one, we're sad, but we're thankful for the good times that we have spent with them. And we're reminiscent of the good times. So life is all about an 80-20 rule. 80% of the time we're happy, 20% of the time we're sad. And sometimes as human beings, we magnify the 20 and we treat the 80 as if that it never existed and whatnot. No, we need that 20 to grow. We need sadness to grow, and I think because of the fact that a lot of uh, the Gen Zs and the younger generation, they tend to stay away from sad, but you need it. It's what makes you human. It what makes human beings. It's I always say this. It's almost like we as human beings, we forget the most important rule. It's like human beings, we need to be human. Being human. That's why we call human beings. We're being human. So by having that sadness, having that moment of reflection, it's needed because again, it help accentuate and help us to look at our happy times, our good times, and just cherish them. So
Man, you talking good, Dunwoody, man. You had mentioned before, can't remember if it was while we've been speaking right now or offline, but you had mentioned how you view or you do your best to view people as you view when you're like performing music. It's that mentality. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, so what it, I mentioned this to my wife, and my wife can probably, if she were to come in, she would tell you that there's three things that makes me me, empathy, communication, and consistency. And I believe that all three are intertwined with each other. Empathy is essentially putting yourself in the other person's shoes with their thought process, because sometimes when we say that I'm gonna put myself in your shoes, we're still in our mind, but they're in their shoes. So I'm putting myself in your shoes with your thought process, how you view it now, how not how I view it in your shoes. So so empathy governs me quite a bit, because that governs who I am as a teacher, that governs me as a musician, that governs me as a father, as a husband, and as a human being, because of the fact that I always ask myself, even before I open my mouth, how would this person receive this information if I were to be them? you know
Mm.
so it's the same thing as a musician. If I'm performing on stage, even before I perform on stage, I almost, in a sense, pull myself out of myself and say, if Dunn was watching Dunn, if Dunn the listener was watching Dunn the performer, how would Dunn the listener receive this? And that governs how I perform. So that way, whenever I do perform, whenever I do teach, whenever I do govern myself as a human being, everyone gets the best out of it. It's not just Tuesday 3 p.m. It's 7 p.m. It's Friday 7 p.m. at Carnegie Hall. It's always the best version. And even some performers, when they perform, there's still some mistakes. Nothing is perfect. There's some chip notes here and there, and those are your minor mistakes. You address them and you let them, you address them, and then by addressing them, with those minor slip ups here and there, now you become more informed. You become more informed performer. I become a more informed person, more informed father, more informed husband, because what my kids tell me, they're essentially a mirror. When my kids tell me, "Hey, Dad, this is what you're doing, this is not what you're doing," I have to take their word for it, because I can't see what I'm doing. They are just reciprocating. It's almost like getting mad at a mirror because you have broccoli in your teeth. When you have broccoli in your teeth, the mirror's just saying, "Hey, bro, you have broccoli in your teeth." You can't push the mirror saying that you got no. The mirror is essentially saying, "This is what you look like," and that's the same thing what our kids do. Our kids saying, "Hey, this is what you look like, because based off of what you're telling me, I'm receiving it as such." Same thing as a husband. How I talk to my wife, I govern myself, and I go from an empathetic standpoint. So that way, even before a word comes out my mouth, it's everything that it's edifying. Even if it's something of correction, it's almost like, okay, it's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. And that's how most people receive things. It's how you say things. And the same thing as a musician, it's not what you play, it's how you play it. So it's always a parallel. And I always try to look at the macro, look at the bigger picture, rather than small picture. Yes, you can focus on the small details here, but it's like, what's the big picture? How is this person going to receive this when it's all said and done?
I can't help but to laugh, man. Such good stuff that you're sharing with us today, man. Could you speak on the significance of setting goals?
Setting goals. We got to have a plan. Having a plan is important, because it gives us forward trajectory. It keeps us moving. It gives us an opportunity to put one step ahead of the other. I always tell people the hardest step in anything is always the first step. Once you take that first step, now there's momentum to where you take that second step, and so on and so forth. So that only happens when you have a goal in front of you. Otherwise, we're just walking aimlessly. Otherwise, it's like we're throwing darts in the dark and hoping to hit a bullseye. It's like being blindfolded. It's like, all right, and you throw the dart, and it's like bullseye. No, you hit somebody in the eye. You didn't hit no bullseye because you don't have, something, to help propel you to that next step to become better. Having goals helps us to become better as human beings. It helps us to become better in our profession, you know. And believe it or not, those goals that we set don't only help us, those goals also help people around us as well too. Because most times whenever there are goals that are set, we need other resources to help make those goals come to fruition, you know. And my hope is that we as human beings, that as we go for our goals, that we are also helping other people attain their goals as well too. Because sometimes we get caught up in our own failings, sometimes in our own drama and this and that, to where it's like we say, well, I'm not going to help you because I'm going through my own stuff. Let me figure out my own stuff. Now, granted, everybody has their own share of they have their own lot in life, everybody, whether if we see they're doing well on social media, that just may be a moment. Who's to say what happens the very next moment after they took that picture, you know? So it's like, while we are striving to go for our goals, I firmly believe that we are also here to help other people to attain their goals. And maybe in our pursuit to help people attain our goals, it provides clarity in the goals that we have for ourselves as well too. Because there may be a roadblock of like us trying to get to our goal. It's like, okay, I have this goal in front of me. There's something that's kind of blocking as a roadblock. And as I'm helping somebody else, in my helping of the other person, I'll learn something new to where I can apply it to my situation. It's like that's what's been blocking my goals. And now I have a clear trajectory to reach my goals.
Man, of a something that you had mentioned, and also the fact that you haven't, and maybe I have not asked that much about your wife, and I apologize about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
But what would your wife say is what keeps you consistent? As you mentioned, that's one of the three things that she could mention about you. What would she say is what keeps you consistent as a person, as a father, as a husband, just all together?
Intentionality. There's a phrase that I have in my office, and I remember saying this to a student of mine, and I'll connect it to my wife in a second. There's a phrase in one of my Zoom lessons that I had a couple of years ago. I told my student that consistency breeds intentionality. And my student was like, where's that quote from? And I was like, I don't know. That just came out of nowhere. And she was like, that sounded like it came from a book. But it was like, as she mentioned that, it's like, it's actually true. Like, it's something that I formulated from my mouth based off of what I realized that I've been doing every day. Because if I'm consistent with something, that means I'm intentional of doing it. And it can also work the other way. If you're intentional about something, that's going to breed you being consistent. So that right there again is just one of the things that my wife, she would mention that and for me, I'm looking at it as me just getting up, doing what I need to do. I don't think too much about it, but my wife's just like, hey, listen, like what you're doing, it's almost like admirable, because it's like you're consistent. There's a lot of attention to detail. And while being there's attention to detail, again, that goes with the whole thing of being intentional. When you're intentional about something, you're looking at it through a microscope. You're making sure that all the details is taken care of, and making sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. And so that's I guess that's the part of what my wife would mention, is that there's a lot of intentionality behind my consistency, because you can't have one without the other. You can't be consistent without being intentional of being consistent. And you can't be intentional about doing something when you're not being consistent. So it's like they go hand in hand. And I guess that it goes with the whole thing of who I am, as I mentioned about empathetic, um, consistent, and communication. And that communication delves in with consistency as well too, because how can I translate what I'm trying to portray to the next person without communicating with them, you know? So there has to be communication in place, because without communication there'll be chaos. Without communication there would be a lapse. Without communication there will be, oh, I thought you meant, you know, there would not be any clarity. So there has to be consistent communication when going about things, and that goes with being intentional and also being empathetic, being in their shoes. So I feel like there's like a huge Venn diagram where empathy, consistency, and um, um, communication plays a role, that all of them they're linked in some type of way.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Obviously, with your intentionality on being passionate about trombone music, yes, but trombone specifically, way more than me, of course, because I have not picked up my horn in forever in a day.
Man,
But
whatever.
what is, once again, a something or some things that your passion for playing and teaching trombone for you is relative to life as a whole?
Well, there are a couple of things that come into play. For the longest, and so for me, I have a degree in music education. I also have 2 degrees in performance. And there'll be a lot of people who would say that, education is here, performance is here, and the two should never meet. No, there's a huge Venn diagram between the two, because of the fact that, and I tell this to my students who are music education majors, if you're music educators, what are you doing? What are you teaching your students to do? You're teaching your students to perform. As a performer, specifically in today's age, either students watch you perform on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever the case may be. A lot of students learn from performance. So in a way, you're teaching, and at the same time, for those people who go for like performance majors, most of them, they'll have their own studio. So you just can't grab a trombone and say and start playing and say do it. No, you have to teach it to them. So there's a big connection between education and performance. Another point is, for me, I struggle with the concept, and this is a forever struggle, and it's not a bad struggle either. It's more on the lines of, if I'm a performer who loves to teach, or if I'm an educator who loves to perform. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just literally happy in a medium, because of the fact that I find joy in performing. I find joy in teaching and having that student to get that concept, and everything. Um, so some of the parallels that comes with me and my trombone and how I apply it to life goes with that. Another aspect of it is, like, in my teaching, that I always have the students to do more than what's on the page. I always make a clear distinction between playing notes and making music, because just playing notes is essentially just, it's black and white. It's just doing status quo. When it comes to making music, is essentially taking note of the information under the staff, which is the dynamics, and also the information above the staff, which is the articulation. The articulation, it's the way you perform, it's how you say things, you know, whereas the information below the staff is the volume of which you say it. It's the same thing as having a good conversation. When music is, listen, I use music is similar to having a good conversation. When you're having a conversation with somebody, it's like saying, it's one way of like, hey, Nate, did you see the game last night? Versus, hey, Nate, did you see the game last night? So both are the same words, but the second, there's dynamics, there's inflection. It holds the person's attention, because there's emotion behind it. It's not just zeros and ones. It's not binary code. It's actually like color. Part of that is the fact that I have synesthesia. Now, I tell students all the time now, synesthesia, like, I tell my students that I can't fly. There's no webs that come out of me. I try, like, there's nothing. Like, I'm not a Superman. I'm not an X-Man. Synesthesia, essentially, my form of synesthesia is chromesthesia, whereas, well, I'll go ahead and explain what synesthesia is that synesthesia is like when one sense goes, it activates another one out of nowhere, you know? So for me, when I hear music, I see color.
Okay.
When I hear music. So every time I'm in my office, if I'm not practicing, there's always some type of music that's playing, whether if it's, relaxing piano, whether if it's jazz, with like you pass by my office, it's music going, there's some type of, because it helps my synesthesia. It helps bring out the color. And that helps me as an educator. Like when I'm working with students, I give them bits and pieces of my experiences in synesthesia. I'll just give you one real quick. Like with the camp that I've been doing up here, and also the camps that I've been doing all throughout Florida, and even back in back at home in Deltona. What I've been mentioning to my students before they even go into the music, I have them to play a B flat, and I have them to close their eyes. I'll say, close your eyes, and I want you to play red, whatever red means to you. And I said, red dynamically, I want you to play red. I want you to close your eyes and play red. So no, I don't say play. I want you to perform red, because the difference between playing and performing. I want you to perform red dynamically, whatever red means to you. I want you to perform it. They close their eyes and they perform it. More than likely, their dynamic level is forte or fortissimo. They're a little bit on the louder side. And I will cut them off. I'm like, great. And then I will say, now I want you to play light blue. Close your eyes and I want you to perform light blue. And often than not, whenever they would perform light blue, it's softer. And then I'll cut them off, as I'm like, it's amazing how I didn't tell you red equals loud and light blue equals soft. You envision that. Red is a very bold color. And because of the fact that it's a bold color, you associate it with louder. You see light blue is a softer color, and now you associate it with a softer sound.
Yeah.
So I give them bits and pieces of what I experience every day. So that way, that kind of give them a good foundation. I was like, now that we've associated that, for the rest of this masterclass, for the rest of this clinic, I want you to play vocal red. So give me a vocal approach to your performance, but give me a full sound. What essentially what they begin me. So now they see what I see, because I hear in color, and they get bits and pieces of that. So all that I mentioned plays a role in my teaching. It's the fact that there's a big, there's a glue between performance and education, and that having the students to see themselves perform, like go outside of themselves and envision how they would sound. And that goes with recording themselves as well too, because I do that a lot on social media. I do a lot of recordings, and I tell my students most of those recordings are not one-hit wonders. There's consistency behind it, because if you're going to put yourself out there on Instagram, if you're going to put yourself out there on TikTok, it has to be good, because people are going to be like, oh, this is trash, and this and that. So it's like with everything that I put out there, there's a vetting process, and I'm teaching my students to look at their product like they're the CEO of their product. If you believe in this product, you want this product to be good. If you call your product Coca-Cola and then you call your product a 7, everyone on social media gonna hear that. They gonna say, hey, the CEO of Coca-Cola said that their product is a 7. Now they were like, oh, the CEO doesn't believe in their product. Now Pepsi's stock is going up, and now Pepsi's gonna take. So it's like, it's always being consistent, always in being intentional about what you have to say and how you say it. And same thing in your performance, what you do in your performance, and making sure that it's a 10 all the time.
Man, I was gonna ask you, and I mean I still can, but I was gonna ask you, why of all instruments, why trombone?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. So there's always a story to it. So as the kids would say nowadays, back in the 1900s, back in 96, because anything like pre 2000 is the 1900s. Like,
Yeah,
really?
for whatever
1900s?
reason.
For whatever reason, like I was kicking it with John Philip Sousa or something like that. But like 1900s, really? But back in 96, when I was in beginning band and in middle school, my cousins actually played a role in me getting in the band as well too, because they also played instruments as well. I didn't have a chance to mention that. So my cousin was like, hey, why don't you join band and this and that? So I joined the band, and like the first day of class, the band director showcased all the instruments. This is a true story. Um, Showcase all the instruments, and I'm like, okay, cool. And the banner was like, okay, this is a flute. I'm like, okay, I've seen an instrument before, PBS, Sesame Street and everything. I was like, okay, I've seen this before, that flute. This is a clarinet. Okay, all right, saxophone, of course. Like saxophone was like the most famous instrument. Then he kind of matriculated over to the brass. So it was like, okay, this is a trumpet. Okay, I've seen the trumpet. And it's like euphonium and trombone. And I kid you not, when I saw the trombone, my first thought was, ew. Like I was like, what manner of instrument is that? It's like, what are we doing here? What's going on? He moved the slide, and I was like, okay. I was like, okay. And like I remembered little, maybe nothing about it, because I knew, I was like, that's not the instrument I'm playing. Then with the tuba, he asked everybody to take out a sheet of paper, and he said, write down your top three choices. I was like, oh, this is gonna be easy. Flute, clarinet, and saxophone. Because those are the three instruments that I associated seeing before on TV. Like the trombone did not come to mind at all. At all. I was like, I knew that. I was like, that's not gonna happen. So the very next day when he called roll, he's called everybody, and he called my name, and he said trombone. And I raised my hand. I'm like, what instrument is that? Because I threw it out my head. I'm like, it's like the one with the slide. I was like, what? And he said he needed more people on the low brass. But because of the fact, so I tell people that I didn't choose the trombone, but the trombone chose me. It sounds cheesy, but that's actually what happened. And then after about 2 weeks, things kind of locked in. And after that 2 weeks, things just took off from there. Every time I see that director at a music conference, I thank him. Every time I see him, because of the trombone, it paid for all three of my degrees. Uh, the trombone has taken me around the world. I tell my students this, and it's not even a brag thing. It's like, no, a little kid who was born in Overtown, Miami, who's not supposed to make it, who's made it to this point. If I can make it, anybody can make it, type thing.
Yeah.
So it's like with the trombone, um, taking me different places, Japan, taking me to France, and taking me to other places without paying a dime. As a matter of fact, I'm getting paid to go to these places to perform. It's a testament. I don't even consider myself lucky. It's just being blessed because of the fact that, trombone came my way. And believe it or not, when I was like, the trombone, I took off on the trombone, but still I wanted to be a basketball player. Now, mind you, I graduated high school the same year as LeBron James. Imagine me trying to be in the NBA. I'm only like 5'10". My man LeBron James is like 6'8". I'm trying to shoot a ball, and he swats it to the atmosphere. I'm gonna call a timeout. I'm like, coach, take me out. you know. So good thing about it, my 10th grade year, that's when that's something clicked my 10th grade year, and something clicked, and that's when it just was a upward trajectory in my trombone playing. So that's the story of the trombone, is the fact that it chose me, and I'm glad it did, because of the fact that it has opened a lot of possibilities, not just for me, but my family as well too. And it's taken me a lot of places to enrich a lot of lives, and my hope is that I have many more years to do so.
For sure, man, for sure. Of course, we could talk, if you were to allow it, we could talk for forever and a day, but I gotta be respectful of you, man. I definitely appreciate you of everything, man. I wanted to say earlier, because we were talking about, dynamic levels and just, your tone of voice and your expression, and even being the empathy and everything. I don't see you to probably get your tone of voice probably above a mezzo forte, maybe. I don't know. It just seems like it suits you. I don't. I mean, I'm not going to say that you probably don't get mad, angry, or upset or anything, but I would not see you to be a forte fortissimo vocal type of person. It just wouldn't seem to suit you at all.
Yeah, I don't get mad often. I get irritated, and before I get mad, I get sarcastic. You know, and even in the times that I would get mad, it's more along the lines of it's no yelling. I don't like to yell. You know, like this is like how I'm talking to you now. This is my tone of voice. You know, as you mentioned, mezzo forte is probably the quote unquote loudest is probably because of the tenor of my voice. It's more tenor baritone-ish. And you know, I know a lot of people with deep voices, it sound like they're yelling. I'm like, hey man, chill out. Like we just having a conversation. Why are you yelling? Like, why your voice so deep? Why is it so loud? And it's not that they're loud, it's just boomy, you know. It's
Yeah,
like, sir, please, sir, calm down. No, but I guess with my approach is just looking at the overall aspect of things. It's the macro. One thing that I learned from like well, before I even say that, I like to hang around people. And for me, like I don't like being the smartest person in the room. I like to be around people who are smarter than me because I thrive off of wisdom. That's I mean, and you know, just to go into the spiritual aspect is like for me, it's like the one thing I always, you know, pray for is just wisdom. Same thing like for Solomon.
yeah,
You know, it's like it's not riches, it's not fame. You know, I can care less about that. It's not about being popular. It's like how can I affect you in a positive manner? How can I set you in a right trajectory? You know, type thing. And because of that, I've learned a number of things where it's like I don't get mad often. I do mention my frustrations, but in the normal sense of what mad looks like, I don't get to that point, or I try not to get at that point because I'm not perfect. I try not to get to that point because I understand that once we get mad, the rational side of our brain shuts off. We become irrational. Think about it. Like you're driving and someone cuts you off. You're no longer thinking rationally because you're that anger. And I've learned that from someone, one of my good friends, one of my mentors, who has wisdom beyond wisdom beyond wisdom. So it's like, as I mentioned to you at the beginning of this, it's like if I can share anything to help people, because I like to thrive off of people who have wisdom, and I would like to hope that whatever I've mentioned during our time together has or will benefit others. You know, whether as a human being, whether as a father, and for those who are in music, or maybe if they're not in music, they can transfer that learning based off of that discipline into their own discipline, so yeah.
for sure, man. Like I said, I'm not gonna hold you for too much longer. Just a couple of other things. What does your name mean?
Well, I don't know what my name mean, but I know when I was at FAMU that we had in our African studies class, we had to look up the origin of our names. So I asked my parents, and originally, like origin wise, like it's not, there's no meaning I figured out, but I found out what my name was supposed to be. Like initially, my name was supposed to be Rudy. It was supposed to be Rudy. Then it went from Rudy to Woody. And then my dad saw in a book Dunwoody. Now Dunwoody, I thought Dunwoody was like a made up name. But as I got older, it's actually a common last name. Like as a matter of fact, if you go to Georgia, like people ask me all the time, it's like, hey, are you from Georgia? It's like, no. It's like, and then I found out that there's actually a city in Georgia named Dunwoody, Georgia. It's very affluent, it's very, ritzy and this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But originally, if you look online, you type in Dunwoody will come up as a last name. It's a common last name in England. Um, which is the reason why I never understood. But like my professors, while I was at FAMU, they always called me Merville Dunwoody, thinking
Mm.
that Dunwoody was my last name. It's no, it's Dunwoody Merville. But people was like, well, you have two last. It's like people would say Merville sounds like a first name. Like, okay, cool. So, but it's Dunwoody Merville. Even still today, when I'm, doing reservations, or if someone does like a hotel reservation for me, I'll say, okay, my name is Dunwoody Merville. They was like, I can't find it. I'm like, try Merville Dunwoody. Type it. We found it. I'm like, cha-ching. It never fails me. But yeah, so that's essentially what it was. My name was supposed to be Rudy. It went from Rudy to Woody. And then, like as I mentioned, my dad saw Dunwoody in a book as a last name, and he put it as my first name.
Wow. Wow. You touched on another thing I was going to make mention of, because I know that you had mentioned the exposure and experience, but you hadn't spoken of your HBCU experience. So you had, of course, just touched on it. Just briefly, how was for you? How was your time at the illustrious FAMU?
Oh, here we go. You ain't gotta say illustrious. First off, what I will say is that I love my alma mater. I don't love everything about it. And what I mean by that is that I take pride in my alma mater, but I'm not like the overzealous FAMUans. There's a lot of them. And I mean, for me, at times, I would get mad, and I would my wife, she's a FAMU alum as well too, and I would tell her, I was like, listen, if I wasn't from FAMU, I would hate FAMU too, because it's how people act. But then when they find out I'm from FAMU, and then when they're around me, and it's like, you don't act like the typical FAMU person. And it's like, I'm like, thanks, because it's like, it's okay, but at the same time, it's like, I wish, more people would, uh it's a saying in family. It's like, we brag differently. Like, I'm not a braggadocious type of person, because when it comes to bragging, it's all talk, it's all bark, rather than doing. I'm not gonna talk, I'm just gonna do. Instead of me saying that I'm doing X, Y, and Z on my trombone, I'm going to show you rather than say it, because people would believe more than what you do rather than what you say. But going back to the FAMU, it was a good experience. My time there, I know I mentioned this to students as of recent and whatnot. And what I would mention is that when I was leaving from Miami Central Senior High School, I would look at myself as a small fish in a large pond, but people would say it was exact backwards. Like, they said I was a large fish in a large pond. And then going up to FAMU, making that drive up in preparation for pre-drill and so on and so forth, that I knew that it was going to be another 37, 38 trombone players. And I'm like, well, I'm going to fit in type thing. And for me, not saying much, of course, one, because I'm a freshman, two, because of the natural disposition of myself. Like, my mom, she told me this when I got older. She thought that there was something wrong with me because I didn't say much as a kid. It's not that it wasn't anything wrong with me. It was just the fact that I was more of a visualizer. Like, I always, and I guess I knew as a kid that, God gave us one mouth and two ears for a reason. I would listen more than speak. So that kind of governs who I am today, even as a professor. But within FAMU, I did the same thing. I was just kind of just watching, listening, and the only time that I spoke was through my trombone. There was no need for me to say anything. And that carried more than if I spoke or if I had the courage to speak as a first year student. But all throughout my years, even being on leadership, it paid great dividends, even to the point to where there was about a year or so I stopped marching because there was me and the director of bands didn't necessarily meet eye to eye scholarship wise. It was just philosophy, because I thought, well, as music educators, we would place more emphasis on symphonic band than marching band. Now that I'm older, I see why, because marching band brings in the money. I get that. But I did marching band for kicks, but my bread and butter was symphonic band, and we weren't getting that. As time continued, it became better. We started doing other things like ABA and doing some traveling and this and that. But then I came back to be section leader because the band staff said that the section leader leadership. So I came back as section leader. Everybody was happy. that I was coming back. I initially was like, I'm not coming back because the one of the staff members who asked was like, "Hey man, you need to come back." I was like, "Hey man, like my jersey is in the rafters. Like I'm done. My shoes has been bronze. I'm done. Like I haven't marched in XYZ." But he told me this. He was like, done. Everyone has power. Everyone has power. Depending on the person has the power to influence people in a positive light. There's other people who have power to influence people in a negative light. But then there are a select few who has authority. And he said, we're done with you having the positive power to influence people, plus the authority as section leader, that could really change people's lives. And I was like, okay. And again, that goes with that wisdom. Because when he said that, if he didn't say that, I was like, he said that, I was like, okay, that sounds like wisdom. And for me, I feed off of that. I was like, all right, I'll come back. So I came back, and that was a year that we did the Obama, like we did the first inaugural parade. That was the year that the band was like 420. Like we had 40 trombones, 50 tubas, 60 trumpets, and this and that. So like the band, it brought a lot of good because having that experience and also having the experience of like, performing with Prince, the halftime show, in Miami. It's a lot of great things that I picked up, but most importantly, what I picked up is leadership skills, how to be a leader, how to again utilize the power that I have to influence people in a positive light, and utilizing the authority now as a trombone professor, seeing the good in people and emphasizing on that, and maybe even seeing the not so good and trying to change their trajectory into the positive light. So I've learned a lot with being in the band. I learned a lot with being at FAMU. Um, and it holds very dear. In my time, I tell people and people look at me in shock when I say this. It's like in my time at FAMU, and you juxtapose it with my time at FSU. With FSU being a PWI, there's more resources. At FAMU, there's not as much resources, but the musicians that we had, the rigor that we had, like those we could probably we had a better work ethic. I'll just say that, a better work ethic. And that tends to happen when people doesn't have as much.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you have, then it's almost like you kind of get lazy. When you don't have, you make a way. That's how hip hop was. That's how hip hop was formed.
Yeah.
Hip hop was formed out of poverty, with people not having, and then creating with whatever they had and making something new. You know what I mean? So yes, I do value my experiences at FSU, but I truly cherish my experiences of what I experienced at Florida A&M University.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, man. Um, Considering this platform, your two daughters that you have right now, in the instance that we were to use this as an audio visual time capsule, so to say, giving this opportunity for you, let's say 5, 10, 20 years from now, they come back and they view this episode, they see that their dad is up here talking, of course, giving words of wisdom. What is a something or some things that you would want to leave with your daughters? Words of wisdom, reminder, whatever the case might be.
I touched up on it a little bit, and but I'll expound in this sense is that we're here on this earth not simply for self, but to help others. And my hope is that through my actions, that they're able to see that and they're able to replicate that. My hope is that they become consistent in all they do. They're compassionate, they're empathetic, and they're communicative to those who they're around, because of the fact that my hope is that I walk them down the aisle, both of them. My hope is that I see them, I have grandchildren of my own later down the line and everything, and that they're able to take the ideals that I'm instilling in them, that they are sending in that down to their children. Names will disappear. Names, whoever you are, names will disappear. But the actions associated with that name or those names will never disappear, especially if it's positive. And I always thinking about what can I leave for my daughters? What can I leave for the next person? What can I leave for my students? What makes a true what makes a leader is consistency. What makes a leader is transparency. What makes a leader is selflessness. And that's my hope that I can share with my daughters and all those who are listening to this. That yes, we as human beings, I am important, you are important, but when it's all said and done, it is not about us. It's bigger than us. It's way bigger than us. And if we as human beings were to grasp that concept, this world will be a better place. There's small communities outside of the United States that has this concept of just thinking of others rather than self, and they're thriving. They don't need all the attention, because that quote unquote attention will be passed down generations and generations. Like, hey, have you heard about my great grandfather, such and such, and what he did? Rather than having it to be blasted on social media only for people to hate on and this and that. But I feel as if that the sometimes the things that are most important are intangible rather than tangible, because the tangible could pass away. Like the tangible things could be lost, but the things that you teach other people, some of the life skills, some of the lessons, that can never be lost, because now you've affected the next generation, and they are using that intangible skill, that intangible lesson to share with others. And they'll ask, well, where did you get it from? You could date it back you know, to generations before you.
Man. And just also too for today, um any of our dads, any of our fathers, aspiring and future fathers already established, and fathers of one, two, and a few that might be going through something, questioning their fatherhood, whatever the case might be. What are just some words of wisdom that you can share and leave with our dads and our fathers today, man?
So as a father, and even deeper than that, as a human being, we make mistakes. We are not always going to get it right, and that's fine. I think the first step to that, when we make a mistake, is to acknowledge. That's the first step of growth. And once, as I mentioned, once we do that, we grow, and then we become better human beings. We become better fathers. Um and and now the respect of those who are watching us, they'll say, hey, yeah, he made a mistake, he owned up to it, and now he's better because of it. And within the same breath, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace as fathers. I'll just human beings, but as fathers, I get it, we get it, is that we're tough on ourselves. Are we've been brought up to have a hard exterior, and there's a place for that, but that's not the whole picture. That's actually the micro out of the macro. The macro is essentially um being the whole father, meaning that yes, there's a time to stand up for your family. There's a time uh to be even vulnerable, in front of your kids. Sometimes your kids, they will look at us fathers like either as Superman or maybe even as a machine. And if they look at us as a machine, then what they're seeing is that, there's no emotion tied to it. It's just go, 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 go. When you're spending time with the kids, just, spending time, that's important. We as fathers, we like to, make sure we work and provide for the family. That is important as providers. But I've seen a couple of quotes saying that, in 20 years, your boss or your supervisor is not going to remember the sacrifices that you did at your job. but your kids will. They're gonna be like, hey, once they get 17, 18, that's it, they gone, you know. And then you're going to look back saying that, well, I did X, Y, and Z, and then your kids said, well, actually you didn't. They're gonna be real with you. It's not that they're being disrespectful. It's like, well, dad, actually you didn't. You spent more time with your job rather than being with us. You missed that soccer game, you missed that recital. They may not be able to be strong enough to say it as an 8 or 9 year old, but they will bring it up because those are core memories that they will remember. So just find a good balance. But most importantly, if I were to say which side of the balance to stay on, family. That job will be there. And even if that job is not there, there's going to be another job. So family is always, always important because you never know. There are fathers out there to where, it's for me, I would rather have my children to bury me, but other people are not too fortunate that they would have to bury their children. So you never know what tomorrow holds. So time is a gift. Time is also a curse. It's not a curse, but it's just one of those things to where it's like, I look at my 7-year-old daughter and I still see her as like 7 months old, 7 years old, but months old. See that, but then it's like, I'm like, you're getting older. Before you know it, you're gonna be, and before you know it, she's gonna be outside the house, and you'll be like, time go? Spend the time. The more time you spend, the more you'll be able to pour into your kids. And then you have that intangible lesson, that intangible thing that you're giving to them. That way, when they go navigate through their own life, they attach to what you taught them, intangible thing.
I gotta say it to mine, and I hope to not out of context, and it won't. But from something that you said as far as your kids spending the time with the kids, like the job versus the kids, and your kids will inform you that you didn't really spend time with me. It just think of, and I like I said, to not take this out of context, because if you're a Bible scholar and anything out of context, it's like, oh, that's not what it meant. But just like how the scripture says, to depart from me, I never, because you're thinking that you were there the whole time and you might have been present, but your presence was not felt. You were never really for your kids. You were there with them, but you were never with them.
Right.
And not listening and so on and so forth. But leave that right there. Today, anything else that comes to mind that you just today?
Be great. And even in this hyphen that we have called life, and I call it a hyphen because we only have a limited amount of time. Some of us, in age, I may be older than some people, but we don't really know who's the oldest, because when I say that, because one person may be 40 and they may not know that they may live to 42. Whereas the person who's 37, they may live to 60. So even though the person who's 40 versus the 37-year-old, the 37-year-old, all those younger than the 40-year-old, but they may have a longer life expectancy in life. So cherish each day, because life is not promised. Tomorrow is not promised. And with every day that comes by, whether if it's good or whether it's bad, even if it's bad, that I look at it as a valley, and in between two mountains is a valley. So everybody's going to have their mountaintop experiences, and then as you experience that mountaintop, there'll be some valley experiences as well too. But as you go through those valley experiences, learn through, that's where you learn. That's the 20% I was talking about earlier, the 80% to 20%. That valley experience, gain as much as you can from those those quote unquote bad experiences, because soon enough another mountaintop experience is on your way. So taking one day at a time and just be great. No one's perfect. Be consistent.
Dunwoody, I appreciate you today, man. Walking with Dad, most definitely appreciate you for your insight, your wisdom, all of the knowledge, all of the stories that you shared with us on today, man. And Walking with Dad, I thank you. I thank everybody who has tuned in today. If or since you've received some value of some sort today, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the page here at Walking with Dad. And until next time, I will see you on the next episode.